Welcome back. We are going to look at defining functions in this session. As always, I've provided a link here. You can actually select the link, open it up. It's basically point you to the Python documentation. The learning outcome of defining a function is to show you, first of all, what a function looks like, and second of all, how and why you will write functions. And so that you can actually understand code and also simplify your own programs as well. So the conventions about the content and formatting of document strings, which is to do with function, I'll show you in a minute. Document string sometimes is also called docstring. So let me just highlight those. The first line should always be a short, concise summary of the object's purpose. Okay, so we have a real-life example here. Let me just bring you there, just so that you can see what it looks like. Notice that, let me see. So you have define the function. Sorry, this is a bit small. So you have the define the function name, bracket, what kind of parameters that you want to enter. You have 1, 2, and then you have the double quote, double quote, double quote 3 times, and then you have this whole portion here is called a docstring, and then finally the actual code itself and return false. Okay, so this is the square function. I copied that from here just to illustrate what you can use this for. So define the square function, and then you have the input is the object, and this whole portion here is basically the docstring. Okay. This function squares the input. You have the parameters, meaning what are the input parameters? It is a float, input a number, and what is returned is actually a square float. The number is being squared. When does it ever square? Is actually under this return. So when you actually write a define function, you must actually have a return. I mean, you can leave it as a pass, then nothing gets done. But typically when you run a function, you want it to perform something and then return the actual computation or transformation back to whoever that calls it. So in this case, because it's a square function, that's the purpose of this function, you have object times object, that means it's squared. So we run that. Okay, and okay, so this pops out finally for some reason. Okay, this is the earlier enumerate that I actually call. Only now it shows up. Strange. So let me just close that. Maybe it was there all along because I zoom in, it didn't show up. Okay, never mind. Maybe you can actually play with it a little later at your own time. So this is the definition from the Python documentation. What I want to cover here, I'll put it here for completion's sake. There are a couple of things here. DEF here introduced the function definition. I usually call it define. The first statement can optionally be a string literal. This string literal is the function's document string. Sometimes people call it docstring, or docstring for short. The execution of the function introduced new symbol table used for local variables of the function. So this part here is that everything that is performed is contained within this function. So if within here I define x is equal to 2, once the function has performed its task, you will not find x anymore. X only exists within this function. Okay, so basically that's what it means by introduce a new symbol table use for the local variables of the function. So once you leave the functions, they will get destroyed. Okay. The actual parameters or arguments to a function call are introduced in the local symbol table of the call function when it's called. Okay, that sounds a massively fancy terminology. Literally, in our case, this is the OBJ. Okay, the OBJ is basically, OBJ is actually the parameters, or sometimes also called arguments. Okay, arguments are typically passed using call by value, where the value is always an object reference, not the value of the object. So meaning it is point to the memory or the location of the object rather than actual object itself. I know that's a little bit arbitrary. We'll come back to this concept a little later another time. So let's look at the actual function itself. Remember, we already defined the square function earlier. So if we provide 5, okay, 5 is 25, right? So that gives us that value. So what happens if I don't actually provide anything? What do I get? I get the actual function and then underscore main underscore dot square function. All right, so it doesn't actually tell me anything except that this is a function and then it's a square function. Now, if we actually do something like this, this is called instantiation. You have instantiate, meaning made a copy of the square function. So now if I put SF bracket 4, it's square 4. All right, so you can actually make multiple instances or copies of this. What happens if I put 2 numbers? Now it gets an error. Why? Because when we actually defined this function, we were only expecting 1. Okay, so when you provided 2, it's like, I don't know what's happening. So that's why you have this type error. Square function takes 1 positional argument, but 2 were given. It was expecting 1, you provided 2, hence you confuse it completely. Right, so let's define fib2 bracket n. This is returning the Fibonacci series up to the number n. So there you have the docstring, return a list containing the Fibonacci series up to n. We're not too worried about this part here. What we're interested in is what does the function look like. Okay, so if I want to actually create a Fibonacci number up to 100, I call this variable f100. So basically run this and assign it to f100. So let's run this. Okay, fib2 is not defined. Well, this is what happened here. Notice that there's a blank here, meaning I haven't run this cell. If I haven't defined this, this is not going to know what it is. So name error, name, fib2 is not defined. How you understand a lot of these errors is you make the mistakes, you read the error code, and then you realize what you actually did not do or did do that caused the error in the first place. And that's basically a lot of time how you learn these, basically by trial and error. All right, looks like everything runs fine. Everything is stored on F100. Let's run F100, and we get this Fibonacci number series here all the way to 100. So some new features that we've learned here, which is quite interesting, is that the return statement returns with the value from a function. Return without an expression, arguments return 0. Okay, so we saw it here, this part return object times object, which is the square of whatever the number that we provide. Okay, if you leave nothing there, all you're going to get is nothing. Okay, none. The statement result dot append bracket a calls a method of the list object result. A method is a function that belongs to an object and is named object dot method name, where the object is the same object. This may be an expression and method name is the name of a method. So these are like gobbledygooks. It doesn't make any sense to you. Let's look at this. Okay, let me open up. So let's just type f ib2 dot. Okay, so looks like with this there are no so-called method being attached to this. So let's try f100. Okay, with this you notice that there are a lot of methods being attached to this variable. Okay, these are built in Python, so it's very useful. So we talked a little bit about append, or rather mentioned here. So let's just try append. Let's try 100. If we do that, and what do we get? So now we need to type f100 and see. Notice that the append meaning attach this to the end of the list. So this append is actually a method that comes with the actual list object itself. Okay, so I hope that's useful. We're going to end it here and move on to more on defining functions in the next video.